The United States has a new message to the drug cartels. We will find you, we will hunt you down, and we will kill you. Now, it's pretty clear that military operations in the Caribbean are a priority for the Pentagon right now. And just this week, the strike campaign has expanded, going after 2 boats in the Pacific and a show of force by a U.S. B-1 bomber flying off the coast of Venezuela just a few hours ago. And this isn't going to stop anytime soon. As Secretary Hegseth stated earlier today, quote, "We are not going to degrade or arrest. We are going to defeat and destroy these terrorist organizations." Now, to give you an idea of the focus from Secretary Hegseth and the Pentagon, I have a statement here that he made with President Trump at the White House earlier today, where a bunch of principals that are associated with this task force came together to talk about what they've done so far and what they plan to do going forward to counter the drug trafficking moving into the United States, and more specifically, the cartels, or as they have been recently designated, foreign terror organizations. Here's Secretary Hegseth.
So our message to these foreign terrorist organizations is we will treat you like we have treated Al-Qaeda. We will find you, we will map your networks, we will hunt you down, and we will kill you. And you've seen that evidence in the maritime domain, whether it's in the Caribbean or in the Pacific with the last 2 strikes. We know exactly who these people are. We know what networks they work with, what foreign terrorist organizations they're a part of. We know where they're going, where they originated from, what they're carrying. And they know we know. And that will soon start to change the calculus of these boats. So the critique of this is, of course, as often is the case, wrong. We know our authorities. It's locked tight. And we're going to treat them like foreign terrorist organizations on the offense. So the Department of War is not going to degrade or just simply arrest. We're going to defeat and destroy these terrorist organizations to defend the homeland on behalf of the American people, making the jobs of law enforcement safer in the process, making the communities of Americans safer in the process. We think it's a very core mission of the Department of War, and we're proud to be here, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Now, this follows a couple strikes earlier this week that actually took place in the Pacific. Now, all of the strikes up until then had taken place in the Caribbean, but Secretary Hegseth released this strike footage here, saying that they authorized another lethal kinetic strike on a vessel operated by a designated terror organization, DTO. He said the 3 male narco-terrorists were aboard the vessel during the strike, which was conducted in international waters. All 3 terrorists were killed, and no U.S. forces were harmed in the strike. He said these strikes will continue day after day, and they are not simply drug runners. These are narco-terrorists bringing death and destruction to our cities. These DTOs are the Al-Qaeda of our hemisphere and will not escape justice. We will find them and kill them until the threat to the American people is extinguished. And true to Secretary Hegseth's word, these strikes are continuing. We are definitely seeing an uptick in their frequency, and as noted, we're starting to see an expansion, not just from the Caribbean, but now striking vessels in the Pacific as well. The Associated Press, talking about this, said the U.S. military on Wednesday launched its 9th strike against an alleged drug-carrying vessel, killing 3 people in the Eastern Pacific, expanding the Trump administration's campaign against drug trafficking in South America. They say it followed another strike Tuesday night, also in the Eastern Pacific, that killed 2 people. Hegseth posted on social media hours earlier. The attacks were departures from the 7 previous U.S. strikes that had targeted vessels in the Caribbean. They bring the death toll to at least 37 from the attacks that began last month. And it's not just an increase in these lethal strikes, but just a couple days ago, we had U.S. B-52s flying off the coast of Venezuela as a bit of a show of force. Today, a B-1. So according to the Wall Street Journal, and to be fair, flight tracker radar, because it was just out there for the world to see, the Wall Street Journal said the United States flew Air Force B-1 bombers near Venezuela on Thursday, stepping up pressure on President Maduro only days after other American warplanes carried out an attack demonstration near the South American country. They say 2 B-1 Lancers took off from an Air Force base in Texas on Thursday and flew near Venezuela, though they remained in international airspace, according to a U.S. official and flight tracking data. They say last week the Air Force and Marines conducted a similar show of force with B-52 bombers and F-35 Bravo jet fighters near an island off the coast of Venezuela where its military held training exercises in September. They say the bombers circled the area before returning to the United States, according to flight tracking data, and the Pentagon described the flights as an attack demonstration. Now, an interesting note here. First off, Pentagon commented on it, and it's publicly available data. President Trump today was asked about that, and he said the reports were false. So we're going to come back to some statements he made, but I thought this was at least worth bringing up. Here's President Trump on those B-1 flyovers.
If I could just ask both of you, including Secretary Hegseth, there's reporting the U.S. just sent B-1 bombers near Venezuela to ramp up some military pressure there. Is that accurate, and can you tell us more about that mission?
No, it's not accurate. No, it's false. But we're not happy with Venezuela for a lot of reasons, drugs being one of them, but also they've been sending their prisoners into our country for years under the Biden administration. Not anymore.
Now, we should mention that there were also reports today and kind of speculation that something might actually be happening because we got notification that inside of Venezuela, they were mobilizing some of their air defense assets and putting them on full alert. I don't know how accurate that is. That did precede the information, the publicly available information of the B-1s coming near Venezuelan airspace. So it kind of tracks. It could be accurate. Now, we should note, we've mentioned this in multiple videos before, Venezuela does have air defense capabilities. They would not be able to stop a U.S. aerial attack. They could inflict some damage on U.S. aircraft. If we had Reapers, for instance, trying to fly unmanned aircraft with strike capabilities flying over Venezuela, I'm confident they'd be able to shoot down some of those. I mean, the Houthis shot down like 25 in a pretty short period of time. When we start talking about manned aircraft, they definitely have more ability to prevent being hit by surface-to-air fire. And then, of course, when you get into like the F-35s, it's going to be hard for Venezuela, I would argue impossible for Venezuela to even identify those aircraft as they fly overhead. Nonetheless, Venezuela does have air defense capacity, and it looks like earlier today they were activated. Now, to go back to some strikes that were carried out a couple weeks ago, there was or a little over a week ago, there's been some controversy here where there was a narco sub, and I'll play the footage here. It's a submarine. This is not a fishing vessel, right? This was struck by U.S. forces, and there were 2 survivors. Those survivors were picked up by U.S. Navy personnel. They were treated for their wounds, and then they were sent back to their home countries. One went to Colombia, and Colombia said, we are prosecuting this guy like a criminal because he was on a narco sub. And that is different than the other allegations that Colombia made that we killed a fisherman in a boat. 2 different instances, and it's important to recognize that. They are prosecuting this one survivor as a criminal. Ecuador said, no, we're releasing him. So a report in the BBC said Ecuador has released the survivor of a U.S. strike on a submarine alleged to have been smuggling drugs in the Caribbean. U.S. military forces captured the Ecuadorian national along with a Colombian citizen after they attacked the submarine the 2 were on. U.S. President Donald Trump said they would be returned to their countries of origin for detention and prosecution. But the Ecuadorian Attorney General's office has said in a statement that the Ecuadorian survivor could not be detained because there was no report of a crime that has been brought to the attention of this institution. We're getting into some kind of nuanced legal takes here, and to be fair, I feel like this is somewhat complicated when you've got, a Colombian and an Ecuadorian in maybe a Venezuelan boat coming from Venezuelan territory in international waters struck by the United States. Like, I guess I can see how prosecuting that could get tricky, maybe more so if all of the evidence was destroyed in the U.S. I mean, I don't know. Are we going to share necessarily the intelligence that led up to that strike? So this is interesting. I would expect this to continue. Secretary Hegseth today, when asked about this, said, look, this was a pretty common practice during the global war on terror, and he's correct. The vast majority of the people that we picked up in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria were sent to the local authorities for detention and prosecution. And it's kind of a grab bag if they actually were prosecuted or if they all were let out at different times or even prosecuted at all. It sounds like that's the process that we're going to be following here. So again, if there are survivors in future strikes, expect them to be repatriated rather than detained long-term by the United States. Now, of course, we still have the continued questioning about the legality of these military operations, specifically the lethal strikes. President Trump was asked about this yesterday in the White House, and I have 2 clips I want to play here back to back. It kind of looks like it's the same one, so I want to be clear. This is 2 clips talking about the legality and then also kind of suggesting we've got strikes coming on land, maybe against infrastructure in Venezuela, perhaps, in the very near future. Here's President Trump in the White House yesterday.
Do you have legal authority if they do come?
Yes, we do. We have legal authority. We're allowed to do that. And if we do by land, we may go back to Congress. But we have, this is a national security problem. Wait. And we will hit them very hard when they come in by land. And they haven't experienced that yet, but now we're totally prepared to do that. We'll probably go back to Congress and explain exactly what we're doing when we come to the land. We don't have to do that, but I think, Marco, I'd like to do that. You may respond to that if you want.
Now, in terms of the pushback, people raising their hand and saying, wait a minute, cartels can be bad, but are we doing this the legal way? And of course, there's been some hesitation there recently, right? We just had the current head of U.S. Southern Command until the end of the year, step down 1 year into what is typically a 3-year assignment. He's retiring early. That raised some flags. There were some reports that he did not necessarily think some of these actions were being carried out in a legal manner. From a U.S. government perspective, the one person that continues, from my perspective, continues to kind of stand firm, and he's making the same arguments today that he was the first strike that was carried out, and a lot of times during the global war on terror as well. We should mention that. Senator Rand Paul saying, look, this isn't legal. We shouldn't be doing this. We need to have more conversation. Here's Senator Paul.
Number one, there is no fentanyl made in Venezuela. Not just a little bit. There's none being made in Venezuela. These are outboard boats that, in order for them to get to Miami, would have to stop and refuel 20 times. They're in all likely going to Trinidad and Tobago, which is an island right off of the coast of Venezuela. So there's a lot of reasons to be worried about this. But number one is the broader principle of when can you kill people indiscriminately? When you're at war. That's why when we declare war, it's supposed to be done by Congress. It's supposed to be thoughtful. It's supposed to be debated. And we're not supposed to do it willy-nilly. And then when you have war, you just kill people in the war zone. And even then there are rules of engagement. But interdicting drugs has always been a criminal activity and a criminal anti-crime sort of activity where we don't just summarily execute people. We actually present evidence and convict them.
Now, in terms of what comes next, we really are kind of setting the stage for some sort of increased military strikes inside of Venezuela. Just a combination here. The resources we have piling up in Southcom. President Trump and Secretary Hegseth are on record regularly saying they're running out of boats. They're not as many targets as there once were. And President Trump, of course, hinting that land strikes could be coming in the near term is a bit of an indication. I wouldn't expect those in Mexico. I think the immediate thought is probably people trying to cross the border. Let's look at Venezuela, at some of the cartel facilities inland inside of Venezuelan territory. When looking at the B-52 and B-1 bomber flights in recent days, the F-35s, a lot of that, there's two pieces. There's going to be a show of force saying, look at what we have available that we're massing to move towards your country. We're taking this very seriously. Another part is data collection in terms of the radar signature and the air defense available on the ground. So also when a B-1 starts flying near your country, if we have intelligence assets overhead watching or on ground, you can see how Venezuela is responding. Who is leaving their certain areas, what equipment is being moved into different locations, so on and so forth. All of that helps paint a better picture for when a strike does eventually take place. Last but not least, as we saw with the strikes in Iran, there's always an element, generally going to be an element of deception. So if Venezuela over time gets used to U.S. warplanes flying near their coast, they might not be as ready for when the strike actually does come. It looks like just another day, just another show of force, and then something goes boom. Now, President Trump today, I'm not going to play this footage because it's just like 3 minutes of rambling. He was asked a question that I think we should get a lot more attention on, where the reporter said, hey, we're comparing this new war on drugs with the global war on terror, comparing these cartels to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. Those wars required a significant number of boots on ground to even come close to accomplishing some of those objectives. Are there going to be boots on ground in Venezuela or to deal with these cartels? I think that's a very important question, especially as Secretary Hegseth is saying, we are not just deterring these guys. We're not just making them move back a little bit. We are destroying them entirely. To be clear, we cannot entirely destroy the cartels with standoff munitions. It cannot happen. Now, we can do it or would have an opportunity to do it through our partner forces on the ground, coalitions on the ground. President Trump just did not answer the question. He veered. He did the veering off in a different direction, talking about like immigration issues and Biden policies. Never came back, never mentioned the concept of U.S. boots on ground. I wouldn't read too much into that in one way or another. I would have preferred that he said, absolutely not. That's out of the question. That's not something we're going to do, especially until we have further conversation amongst the American people and some debate as to whether or not this is actually where we want to commit our sons and daughters, our national treasure, to some sort of ground operation in Venezuela. Either way, I do think it's an important question. I hope that reporters keep asking that and kind of force somebody to give a bit of an answer. But either way, that's where everything sits in Southcom right now. Expect it to continue for quite a while. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.